Well, 2 days after the federal government released its budget, the Ontario government will table its fall fiscal update this afternoon. Finance Minister Peter Bethlenfalvy will share how Ontario's books are faring amid the ongoing impacts of U.S. tariffs. So for more on what could be in today's update, let's bring in CTV's political commentator, friend of the show, Scott Reid. Scott, always good to talk to you about things like this. 2 days after that budget with, an almost $80 billion deficit, Peter Bethlenfalvy, what's he likely feeling like when he releases the update for Ontario's numbers?
Well, the first thing we're going to look for is what's the statement of accounts. So what is the Ontario deficit? It was projected to be $9.8 billion, which is no small sum for a province. However, there are kind of hints out of Ontario that maybe growth wasn't quite as depressed as they thought. So perhaps that number will be larger than expected. Better than expected, I should say. Like golf, we want a low score, not a high score with deficits. And so maybe it'll be less than 9.8 billion. That's the first thing people look for. That's the headline. But the really important story is, what do they see going forward? How bad is it going to get? And what is the government going to do about it? Because we know that Trump's tariffs, targeting the auto sector, targeting steel, targeting aluminum, more than almost any aspect, any part of the country, they really hammer Ontario. So how bad do they think growth is going to get? How severe do they think the impact's going to be on our economy and on the individuals that, are looking for jobs or trying to keep their jobs?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what sort of stock do people put in this versus a budget, Scott? Because we know the province, first of all, won't line up its budget calendar now with the federal budget, which they now say is going to be happening later in the year. How important is this in terms of politically, people assessing how the government's doing?
Well, the answer is it depends, and it depends on how they use it. Typically, an economic statement is just supposed to be a statement of accounts. Here's what the deficit numbers are. Here's our economic projections going forward. Here's our future deficit projections. And it doesn't include a bunch of measures like, oh, well, here's where we're going to cut taxes, or here's some programs in which we're going to invest and spend. It's sometimes, though, you use an economic statement to sneak in some measures. So we'll be watching to see if the government does do any spending, it does do any tax cuts, anything in anticipation of slower growth because of trade. If it doesn't, it's going to be primarily of interest, frankly, to economists who are going to be saying, all right, how bad do we think this is going to turn? If they do some measures, then they'll be trying to signal politically that they want to get ahead of that bad news. But here's one interesting thing. When you talk to people at Queen's Park, they see that Peter Bethlenfalvy has really become Mr. Finance Minister in the past 6 months. He's telling his fellow ministers, no, clamp down on the spending, not going to get a yes to every single request for expenditures. And so I think partly because they do see tough times coming, they're saying we have to husband our resources as a government, which has not really been the style of this Ford administration. So
what should we be listening for in terms of the communications part of this, Scott? I mean, obviously that is your background is in comms here. Peter Bethlenfalvy, the minister, it comes across, he's got a very pleasant disposition. He smiles a lot. But if he's giving us some bad, economic update news, what are the sort of key terms, or what should we be listening for from that side of it?
It's all going to be about protection. If you look at the language that Ford has employed through the last election earlier this year and then since then, it's about shielding the economy, protecting the economy, keeping us strong and secure in the face of Trump's hostility. So I'd be looking for those kind of watchwords. Even as the finance minister may deliver negative news, they'll want to rush and to insist that they have taken steps or will take new steps to help shield people's jobs, to protect their jobs, and to make certain that those industries are strong. That's what I'll be watching for in terms of political communication. Not just how bad is it going to get, but what are you doing, you, Government of Ontario, doing about it? And that's where I think you'll find that the political judgment gets applied after.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Scott Reid, always appreciate the time and analysis. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.